Hello my friends, Sean Ferrick here for Trek Culture, and today's video is brought to you by Star Trek Fleet Command. Hooray! More on that now in a second.
It is absolutely fair to say that the Star Trek movie franchise has been all over the place since its inception, swinging rapidly from iconic space epics to totally mediocre clunkers. But even the weakest Trek film is at least somewhat memorable for its big bad. Its megalomaniac villain who comes to blows with the crew of the Enterprise for whatever reason. The recent J.J. Abrams-fronted reboot franchise, aka the Kelvin timeline, has been unafraid to lift liberally from the Prime timeline. And so if the planned fourth Trek film starring Chris Pine and co actually gets going, it could very well rope in more villains from the franchise's past. So what better time to consider which contemporary actors could play every major villain from the Prime Trek movies. Note that we're excluding Star Trek the Motion Picture because its villain is a non-humanoid alien probe, and also Star Trek IV The Voyage Home because it doesn't even have a clear-cut main antagonist. When considering these recasting decisions, keep in mind that we are not simply seeking out actors who bear a resemblance to the original actor. It is far more important that they bring the necessary gravitas to the table in order to offer a worthwhile new take on such iconic and memorable Trek baddies. With that in mind then, I'm Ellie with Trek Culture, and let's recast every Prime Star Trek movie villain.
Before we get into that video, I just want to take a really quick second. I want to say thank you very much to our wonderful sponsors, Star Trek Fleet Command. Now you probably know this already, but Fleet Command is a free-to-play game on both iOS and Android platforms, which you can download from the link down below. You can be a bit like me, flying around assembling crews like with Kirk and Spock and Geordi. Hello, yes. We get various Next Generation, we've got Discovery, we've got original series characters that you can put together and blow the crap out of some Cardassians. I should feel bad about saying that. I don't feel bad about saying that. As you play through the game, you can build alliances, you can build bases, you can basically turn what was once a happy family of a federation into basically a galactic empire, really. Hey, listen, I'm not going to yuck your yum. Star Trek Fleet Command has been wonderful with partnering with us on this video, so thank you so much to them. Like I say, guys, come on, grab it in the link below, and just after you've done that, come on back here and watch the rest of this video.
Number 8. Benicio del Toro as Khan Noonien Singh. You won't find many Trek fans arguing against the claim that Khan Noonien Singh is the quintessential Trek villain. Ingeniously devious and ferociously cunning, as played to velvet-tongued perfection by the great Ricardo Montalban in Star Trek II The Wrath of Khan. Khan occupies a unique place on this list because he is the only major Trek movie villain to have been portrayed in both the Prime and rebooted Kelvin timelines. Though Benedict Cumberbatch gave a laudable performance as the new version of Khan in Star Trek Into Darkness, reception to J.J. Abrams' jerking around of fans in an attempt to preserve the surprise of the villain's identity and the whitewashing of the character were hugely divisive. It's especially galling as the perfect actor was very nearly cast to play Khan 2.0 in Star Trek Into Darkness. Benicio del Toro was actually sought out by Abrams for the part, and though they did meet to discuss it, the actor ultimately bowed out. We're not privy to why things didn't work out, but in terms of physical characteristics, for one being Latino like Montalban, and peerlessly steely acting gravitas, he'd absolutely knock the role out of the park. Number 7. Sterling K. Brown as KRUGE. Christopher Lloyd had the absolutely thankless task of trying to follow Khan's lead while playing the Klingon bird of prey commander KRUGE in Star Trek III The Search for Spock. Nevertheless, Lloyd gave one of the most purely entertaining performances of any Trek movie villain, cranking up the intensity while playing a man pathologically committed to his cause. As for recasting KRUGE, it's both probable and understandable that Hollywood would seek out a person of colour to play a Klingon antagonist today, rather than have a white actor darken their skin. Lloyd was in his mid-40s when he played KRUGE, though clearly there's a fair amount of latitude in either direction here. But there's one name that immediately pops up, a fiery character actor who can play both intimidating and slightly playful. Sterling K. Brown has a bevy of both dramatic and comedic work to his name, and he would absolutely bring the visceral yet heightened quality to the part of the zealous Klingon commander. Number 6. Paul Giamatti, SUBOK. SUBOK is precisely nobody's favourite Trek villain, given that he appears in the consensus worst of all the movies, the William Shatner directed Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. But it is hard to fault actor Lawrence Luckinbill's game effort as Spock's rogue half-brother. SUBOK was admittedly an interesting baddie conceptually, given his favouring emotion over logic, much to Spock's chagrin, and desire to seek out God. Yet the character never fulfilled his sure potential, and so is honestly one of the riper antagonists for the reboot treatment. Curiously, William Shatner originally pursued Sean Connery for the role, but sadly he ended up being preoccupied with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade instead. That speaks to the commanding appeal expected of any actor who plays SUBOK, and while he perhaps doesn't qualify as a gold-plated A-lister, there are few actors out there more consistently excellent than Paul Giamatti. In addition to being basically the same age that Luckinbill was when he played SUBOK, Giamatti brings the same physical heft to the table, even with his impressive recent weight loss, as well as a wonderfully gravely voice necessary for any great persuader. This is one of the few examples on this list that could quite easily improve upon the original, although it is highly unlikely that Paramount will let any filmmaker near SUBOK ever again. Number 5. Delroy Lindo as Chang. The Trek movie certainly rebounded with the much-loved 6th entry, The Undiscovered Country, which boasted a much more consistently entertaining villain in one-eyed Klingon General Chang. Chang may not be the most strictly fearsome of Trek foes, but he sure is a highly entertaining Machiavellian schemer. Christopher Plummer is quite perfectly paired to the part of the loquacious Shakespeare-quoting Klingon General, and is clearly having a whale of a time in the role. Plummer was an actor of inimitable charm and stature, and it follows that anyone else seeking to follow his lead would need a larger-than-life personality of their own. And given that we're again seeking out people of colour to play Klingons this time, there are many interesting options among the middle-aged set. Lawrence Fishburne very nearly made the cut here. We know from the Matrix movies he can nail a dramatic monologue, but we kept getting pulled back to Delroy Lindo, who has been enjoying quite the career uptick since starring in Da 5 Bloods back in 2020. Lindo's unforgettable monologue to camera in that film proves his criminally underappreciated aptitude as a performer. But unlike Fishburne, he isn't immediately recognisable enough to the mainstream that his presence could prove distracting. If you need an actor to play a role big and intense, Lindo's your man, but he's also capable of conveying grand theatrical effervescence when the time calls for it. Number 4. Sean Harris as Tolian Soren. Star Trek Generations is one of the most divisive Trek movies for obvious reasons, and similarly, fans are split on the merits of its antagonist Dr. Tolian Soren. The filmmakers are certainly smart to cast the brilliant Malcolm McDowell as the deranged scientist who is pathologically obsessed with getting back to the Nexus and the dreamlike echo of his dead family. Despite the big-scale plot machinations, there's an intriguing intimacy to Soren's motives, even though he'll kill anyone, including Kirk, who gets in his way. The lack of big-time love for Soren in the fandom perhaps makes this easier to recast than most, if also because there's a bevy of middle-aged character actors who could knock this role out of the park. But there's one name that keeps coming up, and that's Sean Harris, who's made quite the impression in recent years as Mission Impossible's recurring villain Solomon Lane. Between his severe demeanour, unique vocal tenor and piercing eyes, he is perfect to play a calculating baddie like Soren. And while, like McDowell, he's not massively physically imposing, he could easily play the doggedly determined everyman who is prepared to steamroll everyone in his path. Number 3. Tilda Swinton as the Borg Queen. First Contact is one hell of a Trek movie, and like the better films in the series, benefits enormously from having an iconic, statuesque antagonist. In this case, it's the Borg Queen, played with mesmeric relish and skin-crawling menace by the great Alice Krige. According to director Jonathan Frakes, aka Riker, casting the part originally took quite some time because it required an actress who was both sexy and intimidating. KRUGE certainly fit the bill, delivering an intoxicating villain impossible to look away from, whose uneasy charms managed to seduce even Data for a time. That part clearly requires an acting chameleon who loves disappearing into the character in the most intimate way possible. And what actress fits that description better than Tilda Swinton? Swinton has lost herself in more roles than most actors have even had roles, and certainly boasts the sensual qualities necessary to follow KRUGE's lead. Cate Blanchett was a close second, but it was just difficult to imagine her being willingly covered in the slimy sweat-like Borg secretion. Number 2. Ben Mendelsohn as AHDAR RU'AFO. As a Trek movie, Insurrection is just kind of there. Acceptable, but forgettable. And though Sona leader AHDAR RU'AFO is amusingly unhinged with a uniquely grotesque appearance to boot, the mediocre material just feels wasted on a veteran actor like F. Murray Abraham. So RU'AFO can be counted alongside SUBOK as a Trek movie baddie who could actually get the glow-up treatment with a new take. Unlikely though it might be, the part requires an actor who is respected for their grandstanding dramatic work, but also willing to have some campy fun too. Why not Ben Mendelsohn? The Aussie actor has carved out a firm niche for himself in Hollywood over the last decade as a perennial movie villain. But his expectation-defying work as Talos in Captain Marvel also confirmed he's able to operate in more light-hearted spaces too. More to the point, Mendelsohn proved as Talos that he's not adverse to spending a few hours in the makeup chair, which RU'AFO's appearance would definitely require. Unless the filmmakers decided to go down the VFX route, in which case Andy Serkis would probably be the best fit. Number 1. Joe Cole as Shinzon. The final movie in the original Prime continuity, Nemesis, sees Picard facing off against a clone of himself, Shinzon, played with regal delight by Tom Hardy. Now, he's certainly not a great villain, and it's certainly not a great movie, but Hardy did a solid enough job with the little he had. And tempting though it is to just let Hardy take another crack at the role, he's probably aged out of it at this point and might not be quite so keen to shave his head bald at this stage in his career. Though James McAvoy has previously stated his willingness to play a young Picard, that's probably a bit too cute a casting, given that he's already played young Professor X in the X-Men prequels. And so we turn our attention to the host of British actors capable of approximating Patrick Stewart's tenacity. And the one who ultimately sticks out among intriguing choices like Jack O'Connell or Jeremy Irvine is Joe Cole. Though at 33 years of age, Cole is a fair few years older than Hardy was when he played Shinzon, he can easily pass for younger. More importantly, his piercing gaze and sheer screen presence, as proven most recently in hit crime series Gangs of London, make him a natural fit. Plus, Cole confirmed in prison thriller A Prayer Before Dawn that he looks the part with a shaved head. So basically, he ticks all the boxes. Granted though, it's highly unlikely that Star Trek will ever touch Shinzon ever again. And that concludes our recasting. If your recasting is different, then let us know in the comments below. And while you're there, like and subscribe and tap that notification bell. We are at 177,000 subscribers here on YouTube. And with your help, we can reach our goal of 200,000 by the summer. Just don't forget to tap that subscribe button. Also, head over to Twitter to follow us there, and I can be found across various social medias just by searching Ellie Littlechild. I've been Ellie with Trek Culture. I hope you have a wonderful day, and remember to boldly go where no one has gone before.